Why does English dislike the Dutch? All sayings about the Dutch seem to be negative or weird. What? I have a date soon. If you ask me, we're just at the start of the crypto revolution. Right. You wanna go Dutch? I know I ghosted her, but then she slept with my brother? Well, at least it wasn't your father. In this video, I try to find out where these stereotypes come from. I share some of the best and worst sayings about the Dutch.
Oh, Jochem.
And I found a link to a 350-year-old rivalry. So, I'm from the Netherlands. Goedemiddag. And I've always wondered why there are so many negative sayings about the Dutch. You might have heard about going Dutch, splitting the bill.
I'm not going Dutch, so.
Rats.
Which, when it comes to dating, for a long time meant it wasn't really good. Some are less known, like a Dutch concert, which is just loud noise, to talk Dutch, talking gibberish, and taking Dutch leave, which I learned in researching is to desert from the army. There's also many expressions about Dutch and intimacy. For instance, a Dutch widow is a sex worker. There's talk about the Dutch being cheap. Dutch gold is just a cheap alloy. Or about the Dutch being rude, a Dutch uncle. And there are so many more. All in all, most of these sayings don't paint the Dutch in the best light. But maybe, just maybe, I noticed these things because, well, I am Dutch. So I did some real research and I asked ChatGPT. So I just asked ChatGPT to come up with some sayings about Dutch people, and it doesn't want to give it to me because it doesn't want to perpetuate negative stereotypes. Mind you, I just said 30 sayings about Dutch people. After bending my robot servant to my will, it comes up with this list. Okay, so let's look at what ChatGPT didn't want to share. Some of these are just factual. You have things like Dutch tilts, this is a camera angle, a Dutch door. You have a Dutchman, thanks for the insights, chat. There's a Dutch oven, you can use it for cooking stuff. And then you have the intimacy again. So we have the Dutch cap, which is contraceptive. And the Dutch rudder, which, well, I don't want to get demonetized, so you can search for that yourself. Okay, but then I thought other countries also have dubious stereotypes. Right? So what does it have to say about France and Germany? Suddenly it's not so afraid of perpetuating negative stereotypes. You have the French, which has food, French toast, French cuisine, French press for the coffee, French kiss, and the Germans are efficiency, engineering, shepherd, beer, and language. Pretty uncontroversial. So what's going on here? And just to be sure it wasn't all in my head, I asked you what you associate with the term Dutch, and 3,000 of you responded. Most of you had heard about going Dutch as splitting money, but in the comments you mentioned a bunch of different stuff. From Dutch in video games,
I had a goddamn plan!
To chess openings, to the Dutch wife, which I had to Google. So it's apparently a long pillow you can hold while sleeping, but in East Asia it's a bamboo tube and it sort of keeps you cool at night, but it also means sex doll in some languages. And it comes from Dutch meaning inferior substitute. Come on Wikipedia, why do you have to do me like that? So where does this all come from? Does the English-speaking world actually dislike the Dutch? The thing is, I never thought non-Dutch people saw us as this nasty nation. I know some people think we're rude because we can be quite direct, but most people I meet are impressed with our production of botanical herbs, our ideas about temporary companionship, and our penalty shootout skills.
Defender who blasts it wide.
Then we have, of course, art, cheese, water management, and cycling infrastructure, which is apparently so good that you can build a successful YouTube channel on it. I also found these opinion polls. They show how American and British people think about the Dutch. Out of 195 countries, the Dutch rank 10th for the Americans and 6th for the British. I'm gonna take that as a win. On a side note, do you see how the British put themselves at 7? But the Americans, yeah, they're number 1. Apart from my own experience and popularity polls, I asked some people on the street.
They usually have nice teeth. And they're usually nice.
My first association is a very positive one. I enjoy Dutch people.
I do not know any Dutch people, but I have a
good impression.
When I say Dutch, what is the first thing you think about?
Max Verstappen.
It's tulips and maybe bicycles.
I like that they're colorful, open-minded, friendly, communicative.
So me, a Dutch person, asking people what they think about the Netherlands is of course solid research. There's actually one problem. No one knows any Dutch phrases. No one knows anything connected to Dutch, which maybe kills the video. So if people don't have a negative view of the Dutch now, where do these words come from? Let's look at the actual influence that Dutch has on English and how these influences came to be. We can first look on the influence of Dutch words on the language. How many words in English have a Dutch origin? As a grand total, it's not that much. This is a chart of the origin of the 10,000 most used words. And Dutch, well, it's not even on this chart. It pulls at about 1%. Yeah, that doesn't seem like a lot.
And for your percent, you get... He gets a place in the conversation.
But the American linguist Charlton Laird has noted that more words per capita have been bored into American English from the early Hollanders than from any other sort of non-English speakers. There are many varieties of English around the world, but you basically have two main ones. On the one you have British English, and then you have American English. This developed from British English after the USA gained independence. And when it comes to the influence of Dutch on American English, I found a perfect source. Yankees, Cookies and Dollars is a book by Nicoline van der Sijs. And in her book, van der Sijs explains how stuff like, well, Yankees, Cookies and Dollars have Dutch roots. But also waffles, coleslaw and brandy. She sees three main moments that Dutch influenced American English. Dutch have been trading with the English for quite some time. Over time you get loanwords that enter each other's languages. The second moment is with the Dutch colony in what is now New York. And finally, in the 1800s, there's a wave of Dutch immigration to America. According to a US census of 2000, there were some 4.5 million people in the States that claimed some Dutch ancestry. So first there is trade, and through these interactions, words like clock, lock and wagon made it into English. A second wave is due to the settlement of New Amsterdam. In the early 1600s, the Dutch were in the first stages of building a huge colonial empire. The explorer Henry Hudson was sent to search for a route to Asia when he sailed up this river. This led to a colony by the Dutch, New Amsterdam. The Dutch presence can be found in New York and its surroundings to this day, in streets, in boroughs, and in cities around the area. When George Washington became the first president of the United States, he wanted to be addressed as His Mightiness, from the Dutch Hoogmogendheid. But Congress didn't think that was the best idea. So they settled on a more boring Mr. President. Imagine if the president is just called His Mightiness everywhere. And in addition to these waves, you also have some modern sayings about Dutchness. Expressions like the Dutch disease. Okay, that seems harmless enough, right? No reason to be mean about the Dutch. But it's the way how the Dutch lose this colony that gives us the first lead. Because New Amsterdam gets occupied by the English during a war. This is one of 3 wars in the 1600s where the English and the Dutch are fighting. They are battling it out on seas all over the world to see who was the biggest cheese. They fought 3 wars in just 22 years. As a serious historian, I will of course give you an honest and totally impartial view of what the biggest and most important victory of this time was. And when you look at all the facts, it has to be a Dutch attack on the Medway. The Dutch sink 13 ships and capture the HMS Royal Charles, the flagship of the English. The ship was named after their king, so the humiliation was big. This has been called the most serious defeat England has ever had in its home waters. And the best thing is, you can still visit the stern of that ship in the Dutch Rijksmuseum. You can understand the English are not happy with this. And it's this time that you get some bad sayings about the Dutch. If you ask the English of these days, the Dutch, they drink a lot, they are loud, they try to trick you in trade, and they really like to go to sex workers. So I guess that's it. Mystery solved. A couple of wars 350 years ago influenced the language. And because the 1600s and 1700s had the biggest influence on modern English, these views just stuck around. So I guess thank you for watching the video. Wait, sorry, we're not done yet. I found something. You can actually find new words and expressions about the Dutch in American English from a time long after these sea battles. This happens when Americans gain their independence. They start developing their own version of English, and they add new Dutch words that were not present yet in British English. And if you look at this chart, where British English has the 9th place in words taken over from the Dutch at 1692, American English is a lot lower at 36, but still has 258 words unique to their own language. What's interesting to me is that the thing with the Dutch and their money, them being cheap and stuff, this is actually from the late 1800s in America. So expressions like a Dutch party, Dutch supper, Dutch treat, or to go Dutch, they all have the same meaning. But it's not just the cheap part. Talking rude, a Dutch uncle, the Dutch leave, talking gibberish, double Dutch. All these things are from this time, not from the English. The reason for this could be that third wave of influence into American, with migration in the 1800s of more poor Dutch people coming to America. And they settled in these areas. They're definitely the reason why we have the cringy saying, if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much. And it could just be that these immigrants were poor, and so they influenced this idea of the Dutch being cheap. In regional American, you even get stuff like a Dutch bath, which doesn't need a lot of water, a Dutch bed, which is unmade, or just Dutch, which means ejaculating between breasts. I guess we still haven't lost the intimacy part. The second problem is this book I found, Holland Mania. And at the same time that the new negative sayings about the Dutch come into use, it's the Dutch role in American history that gets re-evaluated. Books like John Mothrop's The Dutch Republic, he paints the Dutch as a freedom-loving people, a nation that wins their liberty by fighting against a foreign king. And that fits kind of well with how Americans saw themselves. Other writers find quotes about the Dutch Republic from founding fathers, like this one from Benjamin Franklin, on love of liberty and bravery in the defense of it. She has been our great example. It was discovered that the Declaration of Independence was influenced by a Dutch document from 1581 denouncing the Spanish king. Collectors started purchasing works by Dutch masters, and painters went to paint typical Dutch landscapes and scenes. So why do Americans develop negative sayings about the Dutch at the same time that they are idolizing these peoples? To get an answer, I emailed the writers of both books, and I got a response. Nicoline van der Sijs says that ideas of 17th century English people could still have been around in the 19th century. Dating is notoriously hard. Also, these are general developments. There are always exceptions. An answer full of nuance. Isn't it great to be an academic? Stott says the late 19th century Americans may not have thought of it as an insult to the Dutch, just an unexamined way of expressing an idea. And she continues, I'm aware that this is not a very satisfactory explanation, but humans are nothing if not contradictory. It is a complex phenomenon. Sometimes history is just a mystery. Wait, I just got another email from Nicoline van der Sijs, and she says I should look into the Dictionary by Gaston Dollen. And he explains how the term Dutch might not always refer to people from the Netherlands at all. He explains that the term Dutch was originally used for a big language group that even included the English. It then evolved into meaning just Dutch and German peoples. But when the Dutch gained independence from Spain, the English just settled on calling those people Dutch. And they then come up with German for Germans. This leads to some confusion in the New World. Originally it was fine. The majority of non-English immigrants came from the Netherlands. But when a group of German immigrants settle in America and call themselves Pennsylvanisch Deutsch, this then gets sloppily translated to Pennsylvania Dutch, which doesn't have anything to do with people from the Netherlands at all. So in the end, it's actually the Germans that are the sex-obsessed cheapskates? Well, I guess you learn something every day. This might not be the only thing you didn't know about the Germans. How about the fact that they had a colonial past, complete with the white colonial hats? Well, if you didn't know that, you're not alone. The Germans actually also don't really know about this overseas history. What do you know about the colonial history of Germany?
Gar nichts. too little, to be honest.
Relativ wenig tatsächlich.
It's just in the last few years that this colonial history has gotten more attention, with an extra focus on the killing of Herero and Nama tribes in Namibia. This atrocity has been called the first genocide of the 20th century. I went to Berlin to cover this story. I asked myself why no one ever talks about this colonial past, and I wondered how Germany is dealing with it. My next video is entirely on that topic, and even though it won't hit YouTube in some time, you can actually watch it right now, because it is on Nebula. This is the creator-owned streaming service where I'm posting my videos early. Nebula is filled with extra content by creators I know you like to watch, like Wendover and Neo and Not Just Bikes. It's a great service that helps me to keep telling these stories about everyday objects and, well, in this case, sayings. But you're not only subscribing to support me, you also get access to amazing videos you can't see anywhere online, and classes to get taught by the same creators you like to watch. If you sign up using the link below, you get access to Nebula and Nebula classes for 40% off the annual plan. This makes it just $2.50 a month. Well, whether you're a Dutch or a German cheapskate, I don't think that's that much. And thanks for watching. Tot de volgende keer.